This is Akashvani Kohima, and you're tuned in to Literary Programme. Listeners, we have a very special guest joining us today, someone whose pen holds depth, emotion, and truth. He is a writer, a poet, and a research officer for the Department of Arts and Culture, Government of Nagaland. Mr. O Jungio, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So before we get into the show, I would like to congratulate you on the release of your second book, A Kite of Farewells, Short Stories of Nagaland. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is O Jungio. I am a writer from Oka, and as mentioned, I have published two books. One, a collection of poetry titled Calopsia, that is with Pentrail Publication. And very recently, a collection of short stories titled A Kite of Farewells with Rupa Publication. And as mentioned, professionally, I work for the Department of Art and Culture.
So your book is finally out in the world. How does it feel to know that your lived experiences are now being held in the hands of readers?
To be really frank, the sheer idea of having my stories out there for the world to read is kind of scary for me. But I'm also a bit relieved because I've been working on these stories since 2019. That is close to 6 years.
Okay, so can you give us the backstory of the book? What was the very first spark that made you want to write this?
My answer is going to be a very weird answer because the inception of this story started way back in 2018 when I was in Delhi for my coaching for an exam, competitive exam. So I had this very vivid nightmare in the later months of December. So the nightmares are so vivid that I woke up in cold sweats the next day. And it compelled me so much that the very first thing I did was open the laptop and started typing out the first draft of the first story. And that nightmare went on to inspire the very first story from the book. The story is titled The Scarecrow. That is the 11th story in the book. But back then, I did not envision this standalone story into becoming a complete book of its own. It was only in 2020 when I had the time, like all of us during the pandemic, and when I was going through the various folders in my laptop that I came across this story and I started reading it once again. So in the light of whatever was happening in the world and my own personal life, I had this epiphany that this could very well develop into a complete book of its own. So that was it, the inception of it.
Okay, that's very beautifully put. I'm sure the readers will feel that authenticity and beauty between every line. So, is there any particular story or piece from your book that lingers the most, or one that is especially close to your heart?
Yes, I do have one story from the book. The story is titled Code Blue. So it's basically a story about two very naughty schoolboys who decided to bunk their classes and go and watch a very shady film. So the whole premise of that story is that it's a vicarious what-if reliving of school memories with a best friend of mine who has passed on. So emotionally, it was very hard for me to write. So I could say that was the particular story or piece from the collection that was especially close to my heart.
I think that the kind of writing where it costs you something, it often reaches the deepest places in the reader's heart. So I have no doubt that this story will also stay with the people long after they read it.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about your writing. A Kite of Farewells, Short Stories from Nagaland is your second published book. So
yes.
You have also made your debut with your previous book, Calopsia, a collection of short stories. So how is your writing process really like? Are you someone who writes by strict schedules or more of a free-spirited go with the flow?
As much as I would like to claim that I'm the type of writer that is everything planned and sorted out before he or she writes anything, I just am not that kind of writer. When I write, I am more of a director, directing the flow of narratives while leaving enough spaces for surprises. And more often than I would like to admit, the stories end up in places that elevate the characters to a far more interesting sphere. But then again, I'm also not one of those like Jesus take the wheel type writers who completely surrender to intuition. Most times I have an ending and I work backwards from there. I could say that kind of summarizes my writing technique.
The way you just created this thing by yourself where you don't just follow other people's footsteps, but you created your own process. I think that's brilliant. And I hope the budding writers and poets out there are listening, because I believe they will procure something insightful from this discussion. So moving on to the next question, how has writing this book changed you either personally or even as a writer?
So to answer the question, during the editing phase of my book, me and my editor, we were not satisfied with the way the ending turned out. So we had to do a copious number of rewrites. And during the entire process, I came upon this Japanese philosophy called wabi-sabi, that is embracing beauty even in states of incompleteness. And that was my epiphany moment. So even though I was not fully satisfied with the way the ending turned out, I still let go of it. And personally, as a perfectionist, that was really hard for me. So it kind of reconciled me into this very foreign idea of wabi-sabi that I shall be taking along even in my further projects.
I believe that you didn't just write a book, but you also went a whole series of transformation in your character and your thought process. And I think readers will feel the emotional honesty in that particular story that you just mentioned. So, what can the readers expect from your book? What themes or message do you hope that they'll take away?
A Kite of Farewells is a conceptual book. It is an anthology of departure. And each story in these pages is tethered to an object that bears silent witness to the life that once brushed against its form. So it speaks of the relationship between objects and the people that inhabit it. Objects that becomes much more than mute spectators to human sorrow. They become vessels of collective grief and repositories of the most intimate of farewells.
That sounds very interesting. I think the readers out there are excited to dive into the world of The Kite of Farewells. So besides writing, are there any other hobbies or creative interests that you engage in?
Apart from writing, if there is one thing I thoroughly enjoy, that would be films. I'm a huge fan of Wong Kar-wai. And you know what, during the process of writing this book, I was watching a copious amount of Wong Kar-wai movies. And maybe if you are a fan, you may find some parallels in the narrative between films by Wong Kar-wai and narratives in my own stories.
All right, that's interesting. So I think the excitement is kicking in. So before we start the next question, can you share your favorite story or give us a sneak peek from your collection?
Picking a favorite story now, that would be a hard task for me to do, because you know what, I've spent so much time with this book, with the characters and the stories in the book, that I kind of feel that I share a strange kinship with all of them. But I would say the story that I enjoyed the most writing would be The Eyes of the Tiger, because it is the perfect embodiment of the idea that I was pursuing with this book, that is subversion of expectation. And you know, talking more about this story would spoil the end for you, so I would leave that for you to find out.
Alright, so now that this book is out, are you currently working on any other project, or are you letting this one settle for a while?
That's a great question. And to answer that, I would like to compare my experience with the first book. So my first book came out in 2019, and the whole experience was kind of rushed. I wanted to get the book out as soon as possible. So the whole ordeal of writing the book and publishing it was kind of completed by, say, 6 to 7 months. And I did not fully soak in the experience of publishing my book. So I wanted to take a different stance with this second book. So right now, I'm taking my time to soak in the experience of finally having my book out for the world to read.
Life doesn't pause, and neither does story. So I appreciate that you're also giving yourself some space to breathe in between. And before you come up with your next book or next masterpiece, I believe that you will be better equipped and even a greater writer than you are right now. So coming down to the last question, for all the poets and writers out there, what's one piece of advice that you wish someone had told you when you were starting out?
It's amazing how a simple phrase can take on such deep personal meaning, isn't it? That's exactly what happened to me when I was doing a design commission for an African producer. So I was completely stuck, at loss of ideas, and falling behind on a deadline. And when I confessed my frustration to him, he simply replied, great things take time. At that moment, it felt like a cliche, but it's a sentiment that has profoundly shaped my perspective. The wisdom became particularly resonant with A Kite of Farewells. I started writing the book in 2019, and it took almost 6 years to finally get it published. There were times when I nearly gave up and periods when the manuscript had to be set aside so I could focus on competitive exams. Through all these upheavals and delays, that simple advice gave me the patience I desperately needed to keep going, to wait for another day. I have been carrying this invaluable lesson forward in all my creative pursuits, and I believe that it may be of some value to the people listening, especially to the poets and writers of tomorrow.
What a message. I think that kind of honesty can really light a fire in someone who's been afraid to start. I'm sure someone listening needed to hear that today. That was beautiful. Thank you. And with that, we come to the end of what's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you again for joining us today and for giving us the glimpse into your heart and soul of your work. Once again, a huge congratulations on the release of your new book,
Thank you.
A Kite of Farewells. May this be the beginning of an incredible journey for you and your readers. And before we wrap up, can you please leave a short message for our listeners?
Firstly, if you want to purchase A Kite of Farewells, it is available on Amazon right now. Secondly, go out and support your local writers because they enrich our community by fostering unique voices and preserving regional stories. By buying their books, attending their events, and spreading the word, we help cultivate a vibrant literary scene and inspire future talent right in our own backyard. Thank you.
Truly said. And that concludes our conversation with Mr. O Jungio. Thank you for tuning in to our literary program. We hope you enjoyed this engaging conversation. I'm Vedulu Medeo, and I look forward to see you in another episode. Until then, stay inspired and keep turning the page.
Please like and subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for the latest contents. Also, follow us on all our social media handles.